Good evening. Here are our top stories for tonight. UN says Gaza famine is a man-made crisis, and China offers help in Malaysia rare earths push. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Our first top story for tonight, all members of the United Nations Security Council, except the United States, are raising the alarm over Gaza, calling the famine there a man-made crisis. They are demanding an immediate ceasefire and warning that using starvation as a weapon of war is banned under international law. In the past 24 hours, 10 more people in Gaza have died from famine and malnutrition. That brings the total since the war began to 317, including 121 children. UN officials are also calling for the release of hostages, more aid, and for Israel to lift restrictions on deliveries. Last week, a global hunger monitor declared Gaza City and surrounding areas in famine. With over 500,000 Palestinians affected, a number expected to rise to 641,000 by September. Meanwhile, thousands of people have taken to the streets in Israel, demanding a ceasefire and the return of hostages. In Washington, US President Donald Trump led a policy meeting on Gaza with former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and ex-Middle East envoy Jared Kushner discussing hostages, food aid and post-war planning. In other news, Malaysia says China is prepared to provide technical support in rare earths processing, but requests cooperation only with state-linked firms. Cabinet Minister Datuk Seri Johari Abdul Ghani, currently serving as Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability Minister, says Chinese President Xi Jinping conveys Beijing's readiness to support Malaysia's rare earth ambitions during his April visit. In a written parliamentary reply, Johari clarified that discussions remain at an early stage and no agreement has been reached. He stressed that China's support is crucial, given its global leadership, particularly in the separation of rare earth elements. Johari added that cooperation would strengthen Malaysia's position as the only country hosting both Chinese and non-Chinese processing technology. He cited the rare earths processing plant in Pahang, operated by Australian miner Lynas, as an example of non-Chinese involvement. We have more after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Russia has launched one of the deadliest overnight strikes on Kyiv, killing at least 15 people, including 4 children. Hundreds of drones and missiles rained down on the capital and a dozen other locations across Ukraine. Kyiv mayor called it one of the biggest attacks on the city in recent months. The attacks come amid ongoing diplomatic efforts to end the war. But after more than 3.5 years since the war started, fighting shows no signs of slowing. President Volodymyr Zelensky responded by saying Russia chooses ballistics instead of the negotiating table, calling for stronger sanctions against Moscow. Despite high-level meetings between US, Ukrainian and Russian leaders, efforts to end the war have yielded little. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to stand alongside Chinese President Xi Jinping at a major military parade in Beijing next week. The event is expected to highlight China's growing military power, showcasing solidarity among the three leaders amid mounting Western pressure.
The parade marks 80 years since Japan's surrender in World War II. With a total of 26 foreign leaders expected to attend, though almost none from the West except Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico. She is using the event to showcase China's role as a stable trading partner even as US tariffs under President Donald Trump disrupt economic ties. The gathering also comes as Washington struggles to secure a breakthrough with Moscow over the Ukraine war, even after a summit with Putin. Meanwhile, Trump, who hosted South Korean President Lee Jae-myung last week, has signaled interest in reviving talks with Kim, an idea Pyongyang rejects.
Japan's top trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, has cancelled a visit to Washington at the last minute, further delaying discussions on a $550 billion investment package. The Japanese government says key details need to be worked out at a technical level before the agreement can be finalized. Akazawa was due to fly to Washington to confirm terms of the package, including how profits would be split between the US and Japan. Tokyo is pressing Washington to amend US President Donald Trump's executive order first to avoid overlapping duties on products like beef and auto parts. In July, both sides agreed to cut tariffs on Japanese imports to 15% in exchange for investment. Trump said the US would claim 90% of returns, while Japan insists investments must also benefit its economy. Meanwhile, Japan's exports to the US posted their biggest monthly drop in 4 years in July, prompting Tokyo to cut its growth forecast to 0.7%. Mexico is raising tariffs on China from 2026 to protect its economy from low-cost imports. The country's 2026 budget proposal, due next month, is set to introduce several protectionist measures against low-cost Chinese imports. Bloomberg News, citing sources, report that Chinese cars, textiles and plastic-based goods may face higher import duties. This is aimed at sheltering domestic manufacturers from subsidized Chinese competition. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's draft proposal is expected to be presented to Congress for approval in September. When asked about the report, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Goh Jiakun said China opposes restrictions imposed under external coercion. Bloomberg reported that Mexico's move appears designed to meet a long-standing demand from US President Donald Trump. The Philippines says it's open to talks with China on ways to protect nearly 200,000 Filipinos living in Taiwan amid rising tensions across the Taiwan Strait. Foreign Affairs Secretary Teresa Lazaro told a Senate hearing that contingency plans are already in place for possible evacuation if conflict breaks out.
Her remarks follow warnings from President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. that the Philippines could be drawn into a China-Taiwan conflict due to its proximity. Taiwan has faced growing Chinese military and political pressure in recent years as Beijing seeks to reclaim the island. Lazaro stressed that Manila remains committed to its One China policy and will leave Beijing to resolve cross-strait issues. Still, earlier this year, the Philippines eased restrictions on official travel to Taiwan, allowing certain economic and trade visits.
The Trump administration is moving to tighten visas for international students, cultural exchange visitors, and foreign journalists. Under a proposed rule, these groups would need to apply to extend their stay instead of relying on more flexible legal status. For students, that could mean a maximum of just 4 years in the US.
The administration says the change is long overdue, noting that foreign students and other visa holders have been able to stay in the US almost indefinitely. Officials say this could create safety risks, cost taxpayers money, and put American citizens at a disadvantage. The move is part of a broader push by President Donald Trump, who launched an aggressive immigration crackdown after taking office in January. And it's not just students and journalists who are affected. Last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced a pause on workers' visas for foreign truck drivers, showing the administration's focus on tightening legal entry across the board.
This week on Wu Says, we wrap up our three-part series on some of the biggest economic shifts of the 20th century. We've looked at Poland and Russia, and now the spotlight turns to China. Here's a segment from Lisa Idris' conversation with Professor Emeritus Dr. Wu Wing-tai.
You have in the agriculture side, there were too many workers.
Okay, 80%.
82% were farmers. And many of them were underemployed. You could safely take them out and output would not have been declined.
Okay.
But you don't see them because China has the whole coast system. They cannot go and live in the urban areas and be beggars.
So there was no kind of urbanization migration at that point in time.
So what happened was, when China integrated the global economy, the world wants cheap shoes, the world wants cheap textiles. So China opened new factories, and workers came from the countryside to work in these factories. And because these were surplus workers, agriculture output was not compromised. So you only had growth.
Wow.
There was no need to close any heavy industry to release workers.
Okay.
There was no need to reform the state enterprises, because the state enterprises only employ 18% of the population. Whereas the huge growth of the industrial labor force did not come from the state-owned enterprises. They came from the countryside.
That's amazing.
So that's the great boom. They had got all this excess labor that were underemployed. In fact, there was this famous story when they did the census. They go to a rural household and they say, we want to count to count people. And people from the household said, please don't come near. We'll come out to you one by one. And people came out one by one to be counted instead of letting them in. Do you know why? They noticed that every one of them was wearing the same pair of pants. So things were very poor.
Oh dear.
Things were very poor.
Oh.
So when jobs opened up in these coastal factories started by Hong Kong businessmen making goods for the rest of the world. So that's when China became a big exporter. And with this export, they could buy foreign technology, and with foreign technology, they could upgrade production.
Catch the full conversation on AWANI International and across our social media platforms. In a world increasingly marked by fragmentation and competing blocs, connecting Asia and Europe has never been more crucial. Beta Sojinsky, Executive Director of Asia-Europe Foundation, shares how this can be achieved and the EU's role as a key partner in the region.
ASEAN is the third largest trade partner for the European Union. Just last year we had trade with ASEAN around 300 billion euros. In service, additionally in service, trade in service was 130 billion euros. So ASEAN for us and Asia as a whole is such an important partner, and we absolutely advocate for more integration, more cooperation, more connectivities. Connectivities not only in a transport sense, but connectivity in sense of people-to-people exchange, education exchange, climate cooperation, in every aspect.
Beta also shares ASEF works in fostering closer cooperation between the two regions.
At the BOA Forum roundtable discussion, digital transformation, green transformation was very much discussed. I would like to stress that also our foundation, we are doing a lot of projects dedicated to new technologies, new green transformation developments. So I hope that our efforts will bring some positive agenda to the Europe and Asia cooperation.
That wraps up AWANI International. Stay tuned for reports on the rivalry strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more and be sure to follow our social media accounts. I am Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching and good night.